Okay, so hi everyone, welcome. Very welcome to everyone from wherever you are joining us for this webinar discussing the CIPD Learning at Work survey, which we published earlier this year. So I'm Georgia Gambach-William. I work at CIPD in the learning team, and I'm joined by Andy Lancaster, who's head of learning at CIPD, and Laura Overton, who's a learning analyst and founder of Learning Changemaker. I really feel they don't really need any introduction if you have been around L&D at all, but here we are, and they'll introduce themselves a little bit more in a minute. Before I hand over to them, I'm going to run through some housekeeping. So please submit your questions to the panel in the Q&A so that we don't miss them in the chat. The chat is for you to network and chat with colleagues and comments and anything else that you would like. So there's quite a few of you, I think, on this call, so we might miss a question in there, so please use the Q&A. I also would like to remind you a few benefits for CIPD members. Hopefully there's quite a few of you on this call, and if not, you might consider joining us after what I'm just about to say. So first of all, we're talking about learning today. We have a Learning Hub online platform, which is available to all CIPD members. On there, there are also some of the courses on there are free for all members or included in their benefits. All our Essential Insight courses are, and we add to those as we go along continuously. And all the 8 core behaviors that map to the core behaviors in the profession map are also free. Also, CIPD members get individual legal advice, so you can call our HR Inform line, which is available 24/7. And finally, CIPD members in UK and Ireland only can access our new Wellbeing Hub and Helpline. I'm going to read these out precisely so I don't get it wrong. So together with award-winning workplace wellbeing provider Health Assured, we now provide CIPD members with free help and support 24/7 and 365 days a year via telephone or online consultations with qualified therapists. Members can access the phone number and the online services via the membership benefit webpage. There you go. It's like reading the terms and conditions, so I need to get it right. Now, moving on to the topic where we're here for today, we're going to talk about how L&D professionals have more tools and technologies available to them than ever before. So it's no wonder that 53% have reported an increase in workload in the Learning at Work report that we published earlier this year and we'll discuss in a minute. At the same time, our organizations need us more than ever as they prioritize the skills agenda and stay ahead of the curve. So Laura and Andy will talk us through what do we need to work smarter, not harder, and to make an impact on what matters most to our businesses. So without further ado, I am going to hand over to Laura and Andy. We will have some space at the end to pick up your questions. So like I said, please put them in the Q&A and I will keep an eye on that as well. Over to you.
Thanks, Georgia. Fantastic to be with you. And looking in the chat, we've got sunshine just about everywhere. So apart from Southampton, which is a bit cloudy but warm. So wherever you are joining us from, it's fantastic to have you with us today. And if you're having lunch, enjoy chomping while we give you some really interesting insights around that. So Laura and I have been prepping this one up, so we've got lots of really good ideas. So I'm going to do a screen share of some slides, which should be coming up now. So Laura, I can see you in my tiles. Give me a thumbs up that we're sharing. Okay, all good. Okay, so we're going to be looking in the time we have today at the latest Learning at Work survey and report from CIPD, which you can see there. And we're going to give you all the details of where you can download this later on. And the title of this session is Working Smarter on the Skills Agenda. There's so much great stuff in the report, but in this session, we're going to focus very specifically around skills. And if you want to connect with Laura and I, that's absolutely fine. You can do that on LinkedIn or you can do that on Twitter there. You'll be able to find us on there. We'd be delighted to connect with you. So we were going to do a framing question here, but we're going to move straight into the webinar. Now we're going to do some interaction with Slido. If you thought you were going to come and just listen to us speak to you for an hour, you got that absolutely wrong. So if you can log on a smartphone to slido.com, or you can do it on a screen browser there, The actual hashtag for this session is CIPD skills, or we've got a QR code, which if you've got a QR code reader on your phone, you can actually access it via that as well. So I'm just going to give you a second just to get logged on there. And just because I haven't logged it on my phone, I'm going to scan the QR code myself. So I'm live as well. So there we go. So going to be 3 or 4 interactions during the time when we get you to give us some of your insights as to the content we're talking about and some of the key principles on the session. So we'll come back to that, but you should be able to load that up. CIPD, hashtag CIPD skills, or the QR code. So that's fab. So Laura, that's the intros from me. I'm going to have a glug of tea now and get ready for my next bit. So I'm going to pass over to you just to kind of get us going.
Oh, that's great, Andy. Thank you, and welcome to everyone. I'm so excited for us to continue the conversation that this research has started. For those that know me, know that I'm absolutely fascinated by incredible learning and development practice, and I've had the privilege of being able to research that for the last 20 years. For the last 5 years, I've been working really closely with the CIPD. So this report for me was really important. But we want to encourage you to think about it as a snapshot in time. Yes, we're going to present to you some new evidence today. You will get new insights from that evidence. Sometimes it will challenge you. Sometimes it will give you that assurance you're on the right way. But what we would love for today is that we're not going to spend loads of time in graphs. You can download the report for that. What we want to focus on is what action you see is going to be needed as a result of us sharing this with you today. So on the next slide, what I wanted to do is just going to give you a high-level overview about what's been happening. We asked the question, what are the organization's priorities right now? And the business priorities today were about growth, about productivity, about talent. And the L&D priorities were much more about kind of alignment and onboarding content, but where we overlapped with business, which I think is really exciting. As I say, it's been a couple of decades now I've been looking at how we align to business, is around this issue of skill. So, and how do we create the right skills in the right place? How do we reskill, upskill, right skill for our audiences, for our organization, for individuals, and also for ourselves? So we see this as being a priority, and that's why we wanted to focus in this session on this issue of how do we contribute as learning and development professionals to the skills agenda. So I think, Andy, on the next slide, we've got something that we would love you to do is just to, let's get used to each other in the chat. What are you doing right now? Is it your programs? Is it your initiatives? Are you working differently with other people? So we'd love to get you to reflect and kind of, if you're willing, to share what you're doing right now on the skills agenda to kind of really add value back to your organization. It may be that you're just starting. Brilliant. Absolutely fine. There is no judgment in these. This isn't a test, the chat. This is part of the conversation. So we just love to get your views and your thoughts. And as these things come up in the chat, we would like you to kind of, obviously comment on each other's areas as well, kind of notice who in our network in this amazing room today that we might want to be able to kind of dig in a little bit deeper. Now, I'm conscious that we can't spend a lot of time because we want to share so much with you today looking at this chat. But Andy, is there 1 or 2 things that are kind of popping up already that you think that you'd like to kind of really hone in on?
So this is where it starts getting really crazy with the numbers we've got. So this is some things we've got: management development programs and team leaders and managers. I think that's a very common theme for most of us, one at CIPD as well. So we're looking at the whole thing again, just calling out Tanya and Gordon, both calling out managers, also calling out managers as well. So there's obviously quite a key one. Darren's doing some work along professional standards. So that's aligning our skills agenda to, I guess, professional. It looks like that's Chartered Institute of Housing there as well. Meaningful conversations with clients, lots of work around management. And maybe with what's been going on with COVID, is it any surprise that management requirements, we're coming on to that in a minute, are so important. Learning pathways as well, apprenticeship programs. So yeah, a whole range of things. So I think you can get a sense there. I think perhaps management and growth and talent development is quite key for us, Laura.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love one of the comment earlier. I think it was Suzanne, sorry if I've missed it, about simplifying. And I think with everything kind of expanding, our role is, I think, also to learn how to prioritize. And I think, Andy, that's something that we would like to really hone in on today. Because, you know, when we're looking at all of these different examples, and we will review them and come back to you with some reflections after the sessions today as part of the conversation. But on the next slide, what I wanted to do was kind of summarize some of the tools and techniques, the methods, the media that we've got available to us at the moment. And, you know, what was top of our list in terms of media were things like e-learning, coaching, job aids. But in terms of the methods we're using, a lot of the in-house programs, webinars, you know, collaboration. There's such a wide variety of ways that we can do this job that you are outlining in the chat right now. I think what encouraged us as well was that overall, not in all sectors, but overall in the sample, and there was 1,000 people who took part in this study, by the way, and the data was gathered by YouGov. Headcount and budgets were increasing slightly, but on the next slide, what we see is that so was one other thing, our workload. And this was something that's been increasing 2 years ago in the CIPD study and also in this year's study. So we really want to hone in on this kind of issue today. How do we work smarter? Because with our budgets, with our headcounts, with our tools, our methods, how do we work smarter to do the sorts of things that you are outlining in the chat today? And that's really at the heart of where we're at today. So Andy, on the next slide, we have some more interaction. And you're going to come off mute as well.
Yeah, I muted up there because I've been clicking away in the background. So this is where we're going to go to Slido. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing the slides and I'm going to go into Slido mode here. So this is I'll stop sharing and we'll actually load up the Slido for you. So we should be going live now. So what we want you to is just think about skills. Brilliant opportunities for us, but also there are challenges around this as well. So we want you to just say, in terms of thinking about the skills agenda, what's your key barrier in terms of supporting skills? So if you start working away there, that'd be great. And I'm just going to get into present as well.
And while you're doing that, can we suggest that we know that one of the biggest barriers is you're overloaded with work. So what's your next one? Rather than perhaps your priority one, because we kind of identified some of the time constraints that all of us have got right now. But what are some of those other areas that you're talking about? And what are the sorts of things? Fantastic to see so many people connecting here, Andy.
So here we go. So we've got live Slido. If you've not done this before, this is always really interesting when you present because you never know what's going to come up. So you can have a look at it as well. Obviously, time constraints are quite budget. Yeah, man, we're going to come on to a little bit around resources and how we maximize those actual resources is quite big on there as well. So we'll just run this just for a few more moments. And just to say, if you want to screen grab these, we're actually recording the session, but you can screen grab these if they're of interest to you. Sustainability's just popped up, which is an interesting one as well. So the big ones we've got here, Laura, really, I think are time, budget, resources, time constraints, strategy is now creeping in there, and engagement of learners, I guess, as well in terms of that. So some really interesting things around that. So you can say, I guess what we can see from here, you know, you're probably experiencing many of these things. You put your top one in, but this is the kind of environment that we're actually working in. Now you'll actually be able to see these hopefully on your phone. So I'm just going to stop sharing and then we'll go back to the slides as well.
It really marries into the report and the data, because what we're doing in this Slido exercise is just for you to resonate with what's going on in that report, in the data. And we found that the key barriers were around engagement and buy-in and prioritizing, but they were also around how do we get the right insights from the information around us, and also our own capacity as well. And I think, Andy, when we were speaking at the Festival of Work, one of the key things that we both agreed on, you know, is this Marshall Goldsmith quote, is the fact that what got us here, what's the situation where we're in at the moment, won't get us to that point of really making the difference that's needed in organizations. We have to do things differently. And that's where we were looking at this year's report in terms of moving forward and getting into that area. So there's four things that we wanted to kind of discuss with you today, for you to think about your questions, your context, your contribution to the skills agenda. And we want to think about, how do we focus on the right thing? How do we do the right thing? It's working smarter. How do we share the load? That certainly is a way of working smarter. And how do we get ready ourselves? So that's our agenda for the rest of this session. Now, before I hand back to Andy, focusing on the right thing, what we found this year in the study on the next slide is the fact that we are getting better at being proactive, identifying what the problem is before recommending the solution. Gradually, bit by bit, this is something that we're getting better at. There's still, sort of like 2 in 5 of us here who are really still struggling, and perhaps there may be a whole heap of completely understandable reasons, the demand on us, the need to respond. But actually, when it comes down to working smarter, let's work on the problem that we need to solve rather than the problem that we've been asked to solve. Now, Andy, you are the practitioner out of the 2 of us. I love the data. You love the action. I love the action too, but I love the way it comes through in the data. Help us out.
So that's why it works well together, folks. So we're living this at CIPD, not only with developing great services and products and support for you, but also in terms of our own organisation. So very quick, what we're going to do for each of the sections, we're going to give you some practical tips. These are not the only ones, but these are 5 things that we think are really, really important. So the first one, in terms of focusing on the right thing, it's really looking at critical opportunities and pain points. And we had a bit of an interesting dialogue on LinkedIn when we first published the report, because it actually shows that from COVID, we've actually gone down a bit in terms of our alignment with critical opportunities. Now, the reason for that is I think we were laser focused during COVID. Certainly, I see Georgia here. I mean, we knew exactly what we needed to do. So during COVID, there was this sense of a critical opportunity for us in order to perhaps digital support, remote working, those kind of things. But now we've come out of COVID, we've got to get really back into thinking about critical opportunities and pain points. So for you, there will be unique things which your senior team will be lying awake at night, possibly thinking about in terms of fixing. So in terms of doing the right thing, we've got to look now, as we did during COVID, what are the critical things for the organisation in terms of supporting opportunities and pain points? And also that means for us as well, really thinking through what strategic priorities are. And often when we consult and we work with organisations, we'll have a look at things like their annual report, because the annual report often really calls out the particular priorities that the organisation is going for. So we as learning professionals, you might be in HR, people professionals, we've got to immerse ourselves in the organisational strategy, as challenging as it is. And as we immerse ourselves in the strategy of where the organisation is going for, then we can form our tactics in terms of our learning priorities. Asking diagnostic questions is really important as well. So often, and I've been here as well, often people are telling us what we need to do. So we need to get beyond that and think about performance consulting. And if you're not used to performance consulting, there's lots of great things on the internet. I'm going to be really cheeky as well. I've got a whole section in the book, Driving Performance Through Learning. I'll give a flag to that. I'll probably get told off for that. But there's a whole section there on performance consulting. So it's asking really smart questions that we get underneath the skin and understand exactly what we're trying to deal with here. And often it's a performance thing that isn't necessarily just linked to learning. There could be other factors as well. Getting close to the action and managers is also really important. I remember my last organisation, a big social housing organisation, we used to get out and actually walk around and actually get a feel for things. So there's nothing like walking the floor in terms of understanding what managers are facing. And many of you put in the first chat that understanding and supporting managers are so crucial. So we need to get alongside them and really understand what they're going through. And also, just to say, revamping and culling our offering is really important. So what's on your menu board probably needs to be very different from what it was maybe a year, 2 years ago. And at CIPD, we've actively been culling things which we don't think are necessarily as relevant now, to make a really clear menu of what we're offering. So those are 5 things we think you can do to focus on the right thing. If you want to do a screen grab or take a photo of that, that's fine. We will be sharing the recording the slides with you. So I'm going to go for a Slido poll. We're going to ask you, of these things here, which are the 2 you think you're doing the best? We're going to encourage you, not to say which ones do you think you're not doing well on. So I'm going to just stop, ask you, which 2 of those things do you think that you're doing quite well as an encouragement? Let's have a quick look. So again, I'll stop sharing and I'll go to Slido. Oh, I love multitasking here. Okay, so you should have that Slido up now. So that should be up and you should be able to vote on that. So I want you to look at which 2 Yeah, so we're up and running here. I can see them coming through. So you only got the choice of 2 here, folks. So you can't do all of them. And what I'll do is I'll just do a screen share. My goodness, it's more complex now, isn't it? Running learning than it used to be years and years ago when you had a handout. That's all you had, wasn't it? You know. Okay.
I think
Right.
these options aren't just lists on a page, Andy, because
Yeah,
what
yeah.
I've seen in my research over the last number of years is that organizations that do more of those things are getting closer to the business. And one of the things that I flagged, I think it was on like 7 or 8 years ago, was this issue of culling stuff. That we're those that are willing to let go of even them most proud, the programs they're most proud of are the ones that are actually able to be more agile moving forward as well. If they're not working, to be ruthless. But I guess it's like decluttering. Some of us are great at it, and some of us love to read about it, but we hate to actually tackle it in our own wardrobes or whatever.
If only I took my own medicine at home, my wife was, but if we have a look at this, so this is what we're doing. We encourage folks getting close to the action and manage. That's really good, isn't it? So we're actually walking the floor. We understand that, and the critical opportunities and pain points, we're high on that. So that's really so really encouraged by that. Interestingly, perhaps the diagnostic questions, the performance consulting stuff, perhaps is less for us. So that's maybe some things, and thinking about strategy. So I think, Laura, for me, from this one, we're walking the floor, we're understanding opportunity, but maybe getting really into that strategic documentation and where we're going, and the diagnostic thing is really important. So thanks, guys, for that. Again, you'll have that on your smartphone or whatever. So I'm just going to stop sharing and pop back into, there we go, and we'll put the deck back up again. So
I think while you're doing that, Andy, I think one of the key things about this that ties all of these together is our curiosity. As I think that is something that's so important in our world. If we're more curious, we're going to ask more questions, not because we feel that we ought to, but because that we want to. Now, one of the things, those who know me know that I'm always interested in the behaviours that influence our success in an organisation. So a question we asked this year was the extent to which our participants agreed that their business leaders felt that they were making an impact on their organisation and people priorities. So the stuff that's important to business, that's keeping them awake, that we're getting immersed in, that we're seeing in the annual reports, etc. Do our leaders believe that we're starting to make a difference? And it was great to see that, yes, a number felt that their leaders did recognise them. So I wanted to cut that data, and all the way through the report, I was really interested in those whose leaders recognised their value versus those who didn't feel that their leaders recognised what they were doing. And Andy, on the next slide, it basically said the stuff we've just been talking about works. We couldn't prove a correlation, but the studies that I've done over the decades absolutely do prove a correlation. So this is an extra source of data that says when we do get better at getting close, be curious about those performance issues before recommending solutions, then business leaders are more likely to say, you know what, you're really contributing. And also when we've got our own processes in place for continual improvement, that we're constantly reflecting, are we still making a difference? That also is something that seems to kind of come through when those whose business leaders actually really appreciate and value how they're contributing back to business. So that's the first section that we wanted to look at. Focusing on the right thing is one thing, asking of the data, looking at the right things, making our priorities. Doing the right thing, as we've already hinted at, Andy, is something that's a little bit different here. And so I wanted to share with you just some of the data that was in that. Listen, it's not just about more content. We've already shared this slide, but actually the picture on the left-hand side is often what it feels like. It's not about more programs, more initiatives, more content. We will all get buried. What we found in the study, and what we know from so many great authors and academics who've been looking at this, is it's actually the answer to help us do the right thing is on the next slide. And what we found here is that again, those leaders who L&D teams whose leaders value their contribution are stepping back from I've got to do more content into looking at how to use evidence to make smart decisions. Now, I know that this is a core kind of principle of the CIPD's professional map. But long before I was a member of the CIPD, this is what worked for me in my own practice. What does the data say, and how can I use the data to challenge myself and challenge others? So Andy and I wanted to dig into, okay, well, what does this mean in practice? Andy, tell us, what does it actually mean to have evidence-informed practice rather than reading lots of books around what evidence says?
So the fact of the matter is, and I have to hold both hands up here, sometimes there is no bandwagon that we won't jump on in learning. There's so many trends and stuff going on, and but what we've got to do is we've really got to hone in on evidence-based practice. And if you Google that, in fact, if you go on the CIPD website, we've got some brilliant resources around thinking about evidence. In fact, all of our podcasts around learning now are all taking focus around evidence-based practice. So it's not just about good eyes. Doing the right thing is now really about doing evidence-based stuff. And here's some really practical things we're just going to share with you around this. So the first one is about scaffolding and knowledge acquisition. So scaffolding is a really interesting principle in terms of supporting skills. And this comes back to Bruno. I mean, this is, you can go and have a look at scaffolding theory around this, but it's actually about putting a support structure around to enable success. And some of that support structure is actually giving people time, giving people, we are going to say resources around that, but it's a bigger deal now. So as learning professionals, our role is to create the environment where skills can actually be applied and be gained. So again, if there's something which you're not familiar to, go and have a look, have a Google around scaffolded learning theory, and it gives some really practical things on the internet you can do in terms of how we support those things. So our job is far more now than just content. It's about environment and it's about support. And many of you mentioned that managers are so crucial. And that's why managers are a key part of what we do here. Just want to call out social learning theory as well, social collaborative theory. So again, we're even going back as far as Bandura in terms of recognizing that skills are often developed best in a collaborative environment. And my grandfather was an apprentice and sat on a stool for the best part of 2 years, observing and watching in his engineering apprenticeship all those years ago. And even my son now, who's on an apprenticeship, this is about being with others. So in terms of skills now, we really need to think about collaborative learning, social collaborative learning. And it's a skill that, running communities, supporting people to have those connections is something that's not necessarily familiar to us. But again, go and have a think around how you help people collaborate. Now, one which is over time has been proven time and time again in terms of skills development, repetition and practice is vital. It's not just a matter of doing a one-off session. And perhaps if anything else, if we're going to be effective in learning, spaced repetition is proven, absolutely proven, as a way of developing skills. So we give maybe some instruction, or we give some experience, then we allow some space, and we come back and have a go again. So we're looking often medium term, not short term interventions in terms of developing skills effectively. Reflective practice is another one. We at CIPD use Driscoll's model for reflective practice, which is thinking what is a situation, and then how, what, and so what. So often it's a question of allowing people to understand not only the skill they're learning, but where it fits in terms of efficacy for the organization and the implications on practice as well. So great learning teams now are really thinking through, how do we build reflective time into busy workplaces? How do we work with managers to allow that reflection? And it's an absolutely crucial one. Again, evidence shows that if we allow reflection, skills will follow. And lastly as well, we can't underestimate the value of mistakes. Some of our most powerful lessons are around mistake-based learning. Now, clearly there's risk involved with that, and we can't let people just make hugely risky mistakes. But in most cases, mistakes are not organizational stopping, and actually allowing experimentation and mistakes are really valuable. So those are things: scaffolding, collaboration, spaced repetition, reflective practice, and experimentation are really crucial for us. So we're going to do a chat activity here. We're going to take you off Slido. So in the chat, choose one number of something you think, wow, actually that could be helpful. It's not something that we've been doing, but I think that could really help us in our skills development. So is it putting in a scaffolded environment around people? Is it about that collaboration connection, maybe that kind of peer support? is it really thinking about how we do the spaced repetition, reflective practice? I'm going to be honest, that's the one for me that I'm working on, or experimentation. Now, Laura, I'm flying here, so you're going to have a look at the chat yourself on this one. Otherwise, I'm going to lose the presentation. But what have we got coming through in terms of numbers of what will help support skills development?
What's brilliant is it's such a variety, and that's what's so important, because it means that some people are already doing these things, and it's flagging something else. Number 4, reflection, is coming up a lot, and I think having the time to do that, all of us together, I think is quite a difficult thing to start to build in. So I think that that's quite significant there. I think the other thing that, yeah, it's such a wide variety of the numbers here. It really is good, because it's about a balance. One of the things I did when I was writing the report, is I started to look at all of the different kind of people who are really digging into the evidence right now. And you'll see in the appendix of the report a whole series of books, including Andy's book, authors who have really started to look at how to do this. So if there's any area in here, I'd really encourage you to download the book, the report, and look at some of the appendices at the back, because I kind of flagged a number of podcasts, a number of books that you can actually read to kind of dig into this.
Look,
and I think that's quite significant.
Something just hit me right between the eyes on here, just quick before we move the slide on.
Go for it.
This is actually about creating space around interventions. Sometimes we're so focused on running a course or a program or something, but great skills development means we have some space, and we've got to work with our managers on this, because essentially the managers are the ones who control often the space in which we work. So it is about taking a moment to breathe, think, try things out. So maybe part of our strategy needs to be space creation to really think about learning. So just want to hit me again on that one. We just sometimes so fast, so busy, we just don't give ourselves time to really develop those skills.
Yeah, and one of the things that we'll look at that information as well, and we will come up with a nice bar graph for you. I won't be able to help it. But listen, there's another thing here. I don't want to go into too much detail here, because again, you can download the report, but there's a whole section on the technologies and the media that we're using. And we cut the data by those who are using a bit of content, a bit of admin, those that are using a lot of content and some admin, and those that we call broad range users, who are starting to use technology to do some of the stuff we've just been talking about collaboration and connection, reflection. And what we found is that when we explored the broad range users, one, they were the ones whose leaders actually recognized the contribution they were making back to business, get the theme here, but they were also the ones that were using more evidence. They were using evidence to apply the technologies in the ways we've just been talking. They were experimenting, they were trying things out. They were also identifying the needs and having that process of continual improvement. So it's not that the technology will do it for you, but the technology will help you do the right thing and to work smarter in using the resources around you. So I want to encourage you to take that look at that. The other thing that we checked on, Andy, wasn't it, was about the fact that it's about collaboration and the extent that we are collaborating and connecting and making that a priority for ourselves. That really came through in the report. And if we're going to work smarter, not harder, we really do need to be thinking about how we share that load with other people, and that can create the space for us, Andy, as you've just said. Now, one of the things we looked at was the climate in the environment in which we're working at the moment, and that environment to make those mistakes, it's not there for all of us, but for those whose leaders who recognize the contribution, they're also creating environments in which contributions can be made. So there is a two-way space, an opportunity to work with business. They've also got more environments and systems in place for capturing and sharing ideas, user-generated ideas, knowledge management and sharing. So the fact that it's not all about us doing things for people and creating the space, but using and harnessing the space and the opportunity and the knowledge within the organization. And a critical thing for us is the fact that those high-performing teams, the ones that leaders, when they're recognized, their values recognized, is they're also working directly with managers. So we wanted to hone in a little bit on that, Andy, didn't we? Because on the next slide, actually only 29% of us agree that managers are equipped and have got the right tools to create and hold that space in their own teams. Now, managers, all the research on working with line managers at the moment is that they are overwhelmed. They do not need to be an extension of the learning and development team. We cannot do that, but how do we work smarter with them so we can help them do the right things? Andy, this question is too big and too tough for me. I'm going to hand over to you.
So 5 practical things you can do about sharing the load. And okay, I've got a fairly large and a brilliant team at CIPD, but I've been in organizations where I've been the singleton learning person. So in fact, speaking at a conference in a few months' time, which will be largely people who are singletons in terms of delivering learning. And you might be in that situation yourself and look at all this research data, you think, my goodness, this is a huge load for me to manage. So whatever the size of the team, here's 5 practical things you can do around sharing the load and managing in terms of the workload. And we saw right at the beginning, one of the first slides we put up was that workload is one of the key things that we're battling with at the minute. So the first thing is, don't reinvent the wheel. Source great ideas. There is so much great stuff, and part of what the team I'm with at the moment at CIPD is to create brilliant stuff. And without embarrassing her, George is just doing some brilliant stuff around equality and diversity. We're creating some brilliant programs around that. So there is great stuff out there. So I think we're not starting with a blank sheet of paper. Curation for me is really important now. And again, it's something which we need to do intentionally. It's not about Googling occasionally and just trying to find some stuff. This curated process, curated commitment to actually find great stuff is a really important aspect of sharing the load. And yeah, okay, so it might have someone else's logo on or whatever, but for most of us now, getting a fast solution, a really agile solution is more important than necessarily it all being in the right typeface. So we've got to, sometimes our perfectionism needs to be checked there. And I do note myself on that one. So another thing we have seen as well is sprint teams to solve problems. This is agile methodology, but we're seeing some learning teams are recognizing that they've got a strategic challenge or opportunity. They might have limited resource themselves. So it's a brilliant opportunity within an organization to allow people to come and spend a little bit of time, even if it's a few hours or a week or whatever, to work together to solve the problem. Let me tell you, this is a brilliant buy-in opportunity for managers to be involved in creating the problem. So you may want to think about not long-term, but short-term sprints where we can get capacity together. Often it helps to be sponsored by a senior leader, that we actually bring people alongside to help carry the load. And that means also the possibility for secondments. Again, we're seeing some organizations are seconding people into their learning teams to support people with operational experience to spend some time. Or equally, Laura and I were talking about this, it might help for us to be seconded out to spend a little bit of time in the operational, the delivery function to understand more. So secondments are a brilliant way of moving knowledge and capacity around the organization. And what a brilliant development opportunity for someone to spend a bit of time with a different team. So do think about sprints and secondments. Obviously, we've said a small percentage said that managers are fully equipped, but we do need to get alongside managers. I'm a manager with a big team. So part of sharing the load is equipping managers. And I've deliberately put the image up here of a toolkit. So again, part of the strategy for skills development really has to be around what do our managers need in order to be equipped to really be able to support us in what we're doing. It's not about abdicating responsibility and then blaming managers for not making it happen. It's about delegating, and delegating, we know, really means that we equip people to do that. And in some cases, we just have to be good at building a business case for more resources. If it's strategically important, I think we have every right to go to senior managers and say we need resource to be able to do this. But there is a real skill in developing and presenting business cases. A narrative, a compelling narrative, storytelling is really important. Data, quant and qual data. So again, you might need to just invest a little bit in yourself in terms of how to write great business cases, because that's often a real key for kind of getting more capacity to share the load. Laura, back to you just on preparing yourself.
Yeah, I'm just also adding into the chat a little playbook of different tools and ideas of working with managers that I've been working on as well. So that might give you some ideas to go with, because basically we've all got to use the tools that are available to us. I go time and time again to the resources area within the CIPD. The work that they've done, they put the effort in to actually creating the most useful tools and techniques for us to use. And that's so essential for us, because actually, you know what, those organizations whose business leaders value their contribution, on the next slide will show you We're working at it ourselves. We're working on ourselves. We are more committed to evolving our own practice. And the essence there in the report is about we have a commitment to change, a commitment to say, actually, sometimes what worked in the past won't work in the future. And I'm willing to explore something new and something different. It was great in the chat when you're asking about, where can we see some of these new technologies and tools? All in the report, what people are using and what they're not, all the different resources there. There's a commitment to say, okay, how else could I do this? But also there's a commitment to having permission to experiment. Now, we might not have that. Andy, you mentioned it earlier. We might not have it in our environments as is, but can we create that within our teams? Can we create that environment in which we can, let's just try something. Let's just try it amongst ourselves to grow our own skills. In the next slide, we actually looked at how we are building our own skills. And many of us are kind of looking at classes and events, but I looked at the kind of 3E approach or the 70-20-10 approach about, the extent to which we're using content and formal education versus our community and exposure to new ideas versus experience as well. And you can see here as a profession, we kind of are geared a little bit towards our education. What would happen if we started ourselves to kind of experience, to reflect, and to work on different ideas? I was very excited to see 2 in 5 of us are using work experience and reflecting on the results of those experiments to kind of build our own skills. Let's get intentional about this. Let's really work this for ourselves, because these are things that we can do for each other, help each other to kind of update our skills. And we have run through, Andy, so many different ways in which potentially we can work smarter, but all of those require us to be focusing on our new skills ourselves. So, that's just some of the data that we've got in this program of research. So, Andy, I think back to you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's interesting when you look at this list, because I'm actually, at the minute, I vary in terms of how I'm doing my own CPD. I'm a big podcast at the moment, particularly around AI. There's some brilliant podcasts out there on AI, but not just AI in learning, AI in terms of how it's affecting organizations. But it's interesting here, when I look at this, how we would maybe think about our own offering to our own staff around this. So again, virtual classes, online webinar, this is big. And obviously this was spiked massively by COVID and continues to do so. Here we're sitting today, aren't we, with just under 200 of you, just quite crazy from my shed in West London. We're connecting with like 200.
We're packing in here, Andy.
Yeah,
we're
here
in
we
there
go.
with you.
Guys, you just want to know what's going on in this eye line here. You don't want to know what's going on over there. But just looking at this, one that just popped out to me, Laura, engaging with research, nearly 30% of folks are doing that. So we are getting more evidence-based. But in terms of our own learners here, I personally am a real passionate about community, to practice those kind of things. And we said earlier on, collaboration is really important for us. So have a look at the report. There's some really encouraging stuff, but maybe we need to look at some of these different methods. So what we're going to do,
Andy, can I just make a very quick comment on that as well?
Go for it.
If you are a learning and development leader, you've got a team, I'd really encourage you to look at this last chapter of the report, because it flagged that we as learning and development leaders are building our own skills in a very different way to those who are new in the industry. And we've got many more formal opportunities, scaffolded opportunities, whereas those coming new into the industry, just trying to find their way, they're using books, they're using experiments. We need to be supporting each other within our own teams to create environments. So, there's quite a lot in the report. So if you're a learning leader, please, I'd really like to encourage not how only do you build your own skills, but how you start to work with your team to build theirs as well. I just felt I really need to kind of
that's cool. Hey guys, we're going to do some Q&A at the end, so we're keeping an eye on that. George is brilliantly keeping an eye on that for us. So just to say, have a look around this, but it's interesting. We are definitely seeing a general shift. Face-to-face still matters. Often get asked, does face-to-face matter? It absolutely does. But have a look there, the balance between virtual and face-to-face. So there's some real nuances in terms of how we develop ourselves and also how we develop the organization. So what we're going to do is now I'm just going to stop sharing, and we're going to ask you, what's the key way, just out of interest, what's the key thing you do in terms of developing and preparing yourself? So I said I've obviously led with my chin here. For me at the minute, podcasts are really important for me on my early morning walk. an hour's walk is a time when I get a bit of exercise, but I also do that. So I'm just going to stop sharing and just get back into slide. Here we go. Right, so we're going to do a word cloud. So you've got a chance to put, I've asked you to do one word. That's really tricky. So you can't say I'm doing a multidisciplinary, multi-module PhD. You can't
say that.
Well, you could, yeah, you can do actually. So yeah, so right, they're coming in now. So let me just see. Brilliant. Okay, so let me just do a screen share. God, it used to be so easy in the early days of my career when we just gave a handout. Now we're doing all this kind of here we go. Okay, so that's perfect. So you can, wow, look at this. Okay, so we're delivering what many of you are using now. Webinars. Wow, that's a big call out, isn't it? Podcasts is in there as well, but have a look at this. Getting good sleep, whoever put that, that's genius, because there's some real evidence around if you want to be good at development and growing, you've got to do that. That's a really cool one. But you can see there's a whole range of things that we do. Interesting on someone's put Google. Really need to start helping ourselves to be more effective at that, and there are some brilliant AI engines now in terms of curated content and searching, which is good. Curiosity is really good as well. So okay, so podcast, webinars and research, apprenticeship, great stuff. Okay, networking, there's the collaboration thing beginning to come through as well. And bless you, whoever's put CIPD courses in there, you've warmed my heart. It's done me good. It's done me good. So some of you are actually finding some of us, which is really useful as well. So Laura, it looks like podcast, webinars and research are really, really important for us. So that's
absolutely. But the key thing, though, is they're all information. And, you know, I pick up on, I really agree with Jeff's point about the fact we ask quite a lot of content questions, and I'm going to look at that for next time, educational questions. But it's what we do with these things that I think is the important thing. That's why we ask you to kind of think about your application of your work to the skills agenda. And it's how is this research, how is this webinar, how are the conversations that have been going on in the chat room today, how are they helping you to pick up on one thing that you can dig in a little bit deeper to and make that difference to your practice to work a little bit smarter. So I think that's the reason why we do all of these things, why the CIPD, Georgia and Andy are coming together, you know, with all the resources, why I look at the research, why you do the practice and share what you're doing through the research program. It's a continual conversation of continual improvement. And that's why I love this so much. I mean, Andy, when I was writing the report, I was asked to come up with 8 recommendations or some recommendations, you know, and I came up with a number, but there are so many different ways that you can think about applying this report. But Andy, we just wanted to kind of summarize some of the recommendations before going into question and answer.
Yeah.
This one was is the one you love, isn't it?
So I'm sharing this now. So I've got so many windows open on my computer.
You're on the right one, Andy. I just want to let you know.
Okay, so I'm not showing you some Slido panel or whatever. Let's put these ones up. So this is downloaded from the exec summary, so you can have a look at these. But this is where we've got the outline today of the 4 things, which are really important. I think if nothing else, if you are able to go away with this whole concept of thinking about doing, sharing, prepare, all that kind of thing. So we're not going to obviously read these because you can have a look, but there are some key ones here. And if you just maybe embraced some of these, it would probably make a huge difference to you. So so that infographic or that is available to you. So working smarter, not harder, thinking about outcomes in terms of our focus. Really, we're doing well at this, but beyond the course, we've got to look at the whole thing about curiosity, lots of different ways of doing this. And we've said with skills development, there's some key things like repetition, reflection are really important. If we actually get on those now, we'd really help people to do that. Co-creating, sharing, and we've said about things like secondments, sprints, all those kind of things. Getting a managers really equipped is really important to support them to be brilliant. Having a go at experimenting, trying things out, and really, we know learning teams that are doing really well are investing in themselves. And it is about finding that time in your busy schedule, because I can only imagine you're doing a great job, but you're very busy. So it's finding time. So for me, as I said, my early mornings now is where I do that. So you can download this summary, Laura. That's brilliant. And we can look at some of the connections there.
The final note for me is that last one. It's about preparing yourself. Let's say I've been investigating what makes a high-performing team in learning and development for 20 years. And what I'm coming back to time and time again, particularly since COVID, is it's who we are and what we bring to our own unique environment that makes the difference. We can't always control what's going on around us. It's such a complex, dynamic environment that we're all working in, but we can work on ourselves. And so, and that's one of the things that I've really seen in across all of my work and all of my research. So if I can encourage you to do one thing is say, okay, how can you value your own skills and your own contribution back
Brilliant.
into this space? But we've got a
Okay.
link, haven't we?
Right, so guys, I'm now going to do another task here, and I'm going to copy a link into the chat. But I'm going to pass to Georgia now. We're 45 seconds over. How cool is that? We've got through a lot. We've got all that stuff, but we want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A because this is the partnership with you. So I'm just going to go and put the link to the report, so you can click on it and download it straight away. So I'm just going to pass to Georgia.
I've shared the link a couple of times in the chat as well.
Perfect. Okay, that's brilliant. So
repetition is good anyway. So go on.
So I'm going to just
repetition in action.
I'm just going to have a breather. So we'll make sure, but yeah, do click, and it's free, guys. Just before I pass to Georgia for Q&A, we are delighted that we can do this research, which is very significant, but we can deliver this to you absolutely free. So do get hold of this, pass it, spread the word, because this is free research thinking for you. So Georgia, over to you for the Q&A.
Yes, we've got a few questions. Not sure we'll get to all of them, but I firstly wanted to mention the one about AI. So how do you see AI integrating with L&D aligned in the working smarter concept? And just before you answer, I'll let you think on it a second. There are a few questions coming after this that would be good to address quickly on spaced repetition. So people have asked about what the sources or evidence for it are that we can point people to, and also how to convince or like how to explain the concept to leaders that might be reluctant to use this as well, and how to use that in role plays and scenarios as well. So there were a few questions on spaced repetition, so it would be good to get to at least some of this that I've pulled out, but maybe we can start with AI, which is very topical at the moment.
Yeah.
Laura, did you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, let me give you a quick. Personally, the way that I've been using AI, and I consider that I kind of know quite a bit about the industry, but what it's allowing me to do is to reflect. And so it's allowing me to invest in myself by asking a whole range of different questions that perhaps I might not be able to ask the business. Now, I don't always trust the answers, but it's giving me insight into how a business may be working on. And so I think that is one of the things that we need to be thinking about, is how we can have conversations with AI rather than how do we just use it to develop more content and more ideas and more assessments and more ideas for content and more ideas for assessments. You know, I think it's the connected opportunity that AI gives us to maybe expand our own thinking in a safe space that will allow us to be more confident to have better conversations back into the business. So I'm conscious of the time here, Andy. I mean, unless you've got something, do you want to go straight onto the space learning one?
Yeah, we can do. All I'd say on the AI thing is we are all finding out about this right now, and it's very, in one sense, it can be quite daunting. But we've been using AI for years. If we think about it, Amazon, all these kind of things, Netflix, all these systems are using data. So I think there's a couple of things, Laura, for me. One, we need to understand that this is data driven, so we need to be really passionate about data. But I think AI actually applies across the whole learning journey, right the way through from diagnostics in terms of assessments. So listening to some stuff this morning on the walk where they were looking at skills bases within organizations, and they were using AI to interrogate what people were doing, job descriptions, people's experience, those kind of things. And that's how systems like LinkedIn can give great recommendations to you, because your profile is actually generating. In terms of generating content, there's now engines can do that. I would just say one thing I'm looking at is curation with AI to do the heavy lifting for us and assessment. So I think we've just got to face into this one, not be freaked by it, but understand that there's there's lots of brilliant ways that we're going to be using this. And again, I don't mind calling out. I personally really value Donald Clark in this space. Donald is really strong on this one, so it might be worth you just keeping an eye on that. Now, in terms of spaced repetition, you can actually go, if you Google it, there's loads of options around this. So just quickly on the concept of this one, you and I can only store so much in our brain at a given time. And there is this forgetting curve. You have to be careful how we manage this, but Ebbinghouse's forgetting curve. Over time, we do forget stuff. So really great learning, particularly on skills, means that we come back and we try it again, and it allows time for us to reinforce what we've learned, but also to consolidate it. So I think for us, it's actually about breaking sometimes complex skills into smaller chunks, which we then work together. So you can go, there's great stuff on the internet here, but just think about not overloading. It's not like, we give people a 5-course meal and require them to eat it in 5 minutes and expect them to do it. It's about thinking more about the learner. So there's some great things around space practice. We need to be really sensitive to overload for learners. So let's leave that one there, I think.
And I think one of the things that I'd like to pick up on, and also linking to Roshin's question about balancing experimentation with risk-adverse leaders, with any of these characteristics that we've been looking about, good evidence-informed design, it always involves some point you're going to have to do something different. And my view is, why not experiment? I've seen it happen time and time again. Why not experiment with your leadership programs? Why not create more spaces in the leadership programs? Why not create more reflection? So for those risk-averse leaders, for them to experience it, sneaking it into their diet, and for them to actually say, oh, actually, this has really worked for me. Once leaders have become more accepting and seeing how it works for them, then they're often a lot more accepting about how it may work for others. But telling them, oh, we've got a new idea or a new tool or a new piece of evidence-informed strategy, they are going to be risk-averse, Roshin, many of them. But you're feeding it into their diet, into your design, so you're modeling great practice. I've seen time and time again, really works. It really shifts culture. It shifts thinking, because I know what you're talking about. It worked for me. So I'm hoping that kind of helps address both of those questions there.
Yeah, Laura, just one for me. This is through my experience. Senior leaders will not be risk adverse if we're helping them to solve a problem.
Yeah,
I could tell you that absolutely categorically, that if we go to them and say, we think we've got a challenge around this, we think we can support you with this, and actually what we need is a podcast series around this, which people can access from their smartphones. So a lot of this actually is about the diagnosis conversation. We're not coming up with a freaky idea, but we're actually really scratching an itch within the organization. Some good things in here around, just call it Elaine, all our leadership programs are reflective and community-based. So that's brilliant. So again, we're moving away from content focused in terms of connection and community. So that's brilliant. We're 2 minutes to go, and we're conscious we're going to finish on the dot because you've gifted us this time, and we've been delighted to be with you, but we will finish on time. But there's probably room for one more question.
Maybe we can combine 2 questions. There's one about ideas on how to enhance L&D strategy for a hybrid workforce, and there's another sort of broader question on like adapting to new ways of working. That kind of, obviously hybrid is one of the ways that work has moved towards and after COVID. So yeah, maybe we can pick up on this one.
Well, one of the things that I'd love to pick up, because I was looking at Hamad's question there as well, is, Hamad, the opportunity that we have in an organization is that to not think of our organizations as static, but they are constantly changing, they are constantly adapting, even just to stand still. And I think one of the most powerful concepts that I've come across most recently is the fact that we shouldn't be implementing change, we should be working with the change that is already going on within the organization. And I think that's going to be the way that we can adapt. It's becoming more attuned to what's already going on around us. And if that's hybrid, if the people are already starting to work and explore and collaborate in those spaces, how do we work within that change? How do we leverage the change that's already going on around us? So rather than us creating change and having to adapt once, let's get into the zone of being able to zone into what is changing around us and how we harness that, and we kind of go with the flow of that organization. So there's just a couple of things there. I've been really thinking about that, because I think you really hit the nail on the head there, Hamad, with your question about we do need to adapt, but let's recognize that we're already adapting. Just standing still, our bodies are adapting to keep us in this position. So let's be conscious of that energy and of the change around us, and work out how to use it for our benefit.
I've got 10 seconds just to say, hybrid is part of flexible working. Many people can't do hybrid working. So we need to think about flexibility, and for that, my solution on that is our learning needs to be accessible, and for that we need to understand what our learners are asking. So, so that's cool. So we're up. Georgia, I'm gonna pass back to Laura. I'm just
Perfect.
going to say a huge thank you on behalf of CIPD for working with us on the report. You've been excellent on this one. It's an absolute pleasure. And I'll pass back to Georgia just to kind of round off.
Yes, I'm just wrapping up and saying thank you so much, Andy and Laura, for an amazing webinar. I can see in the chat people have really enjoyed it and taken away a lot from it. Just to remind, the webinar has been recorded and you will be able to access it on our website later today, including the slides, so you can go back in your own time and digest it and do some spaced learning of it. And yeah, look out for our future webinars. We do run this regularly. And also remember to check out your members' benefits and the wellbeing hub that we have for members. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay, thanks,
Bye,
guys.
everyone.
Bye then.
What a pleasure. Thank you.